There's this thought that little old isolated Perth got trapped in 1964 and we're still wearing long socks and, listening to the Beatles. Or some of us are. But, I think there's this feeling that we're a non-progressive, very dated city. And it's not true. I'm Claire Orange. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Digii Social. So Digii Social is a social media-like environment for 9 to 13-year-old children. So it's a live and immersive environment that we've built that children go in and they play, and we educate their choices on every keystroke, their content, so pictures and words, and all the while that children are learning on this platform, they're learning to be safe, civil and savvy online. So we're very new into the world of commercialisation. We're 16 weeks in. So we ran an independent research trial for 6 months of last year where we had first 10 and then 20 schools on the platform. And this year we've gone commercial. So we're selling spaces on the platform. And we have doubled our schools in the last 2 weeks. So we have 30 schools using the product now, which is great, and probably about the same amount of schools lined up ready to go on for term 3. Right, so when children arrive on Digii Social, it looks like any social media. They've got to log in, they've got to use a secure password, and they're given a username. They go onto the platform. There's a general message board. They can go into a chat zone where they do private chatting, which is not really private. They can go into a game zone, a help zone. So there's all sorts of zones they navigate into and out of with their friends in their class. And we've overlaid AI over all of that. So if a child posts a picture, maybe with their school logo showing, we will talk to them about a location identifier now that we know that that's your school logo. We can find out where you live and where you go to school. So we're teaching children all the time. If they put pictures up of other children, we're asking about consent to do that. If they swear, if they cyberbully, if they put someone down, if they racist use hate speech, the content filter is obviously picking that up, and a little character called Digi pops up on the screen and helps the child to understand their action. So we allow the child 3 opportunities to do that learning. So we call them strikes on Digii Socials. After 3 strikes, a child is taken off to watch a brief animated educational tutorial. It's only 90 seconds. So they have to watch the tutorial, they have to answer 3 out of 3 questions correctly, and then they get to go back onto the platform to play. So then they become live on the platform again. When they're fabulous, we give them points. We call them digits. So they get points for being great. They lose points for being silly on the platform. But really, we want them to be learning. If they're going to be racist, if they're going to use hate speech, you may as well do it on something that's going to have no memory of it moving into your future. If you're going to post silly pictures, this is definitely the place to do it because it's safe. There's no permanent footprint for these children. We erase all of the content at the end of the year, and children get to do learning in a safe container and make mistakes, messy ones, and it's all okay. So the platform is really the source of education, and then we're requiring teachers to respond to reports and help requests and to adjudicate on some of the strikes that might come through that children dispute. And it's such a fascinating thing. So we've kind of gone round and round with the language that we use to support Digii Social. So really we are supporting all learning for digital life. Okay. How you navigate the net, it's all on there. How do you ask for help? Who do you know who to trust on there? Whether it's a person or a news source. How do you do all of that stuff? So we are looking at growing out all of that. The children at the moment are on what we call Digi 5. So it's the Year 5 platform. We will grow this into a Digi 6 platform, and then we will look at increasing the offering. But all of that for our 21st century children, they get born basically with an iPad ready for digital life. 36% of Australian pre-primary, so 5-year-olds, own their own data-enabled devices. So from a very young age, we have children immersed in a world and out there navigating the globe. We wouldn't put them in the middle of a foreign city and say, just see how you go, we'd educate them. And that's what we're doing. We do have all of that content on there, and we would love to grow out more content that children get to do modules of content. I'd say this is, the biggest part of our story really is where it began, which was with the tragic preventable death of a very young man, just 14, who had a fallout on social media with a group of friends over a messy relationship breakdown with a girl. He was publicly humiliated and shamed. Within 24 hours of content going online, he had amassed thousands and thousands of young haters telling him to kill himself. And he did. And that's a preventable death. It's something that weighs heavy on me as a therapist, and in the world of education, that in so many other ways, in areas of danger for our young people, like road safety and sun safety and sexual health, we provide them with education and they must do it. Yet the area of health that certainly leads to damage and loss of life to our young people doesn't have any formal education. So that's where it came from, the need to bring cyber education mainstream into every classroom. The concept, wherever we go and talk about this cyber education, it's certainly the very biggest thing that schools are facing at the moment. So children coming into schools in sleep deficit because they're on their devices into the night, stuff happening out in their home environments that just rolls into the playground and classroom. So everyone wants this solution in the school. Not everyone has the money to put this solution in their school. It's $25 a head a child for a year. So it's not an expensive solution, but it's still well beyond a school budget. So the concept, incredibly received. The actual turning that and converting it into sales, that's the bit that requires lots of work. And, really we want that top-down approach. We need every Australian child educated as soon as possible. So I have petitioned federal government, all agencies, the E-Safety Commissioner, as well as education departments have gone through all of that. But it is something that you have to show growth, traction and outcome to be able to get people to sit up and take notice of a product. You can imagine there's hundreds of people who approach education department every day saying, I've got the world's next best educational resource. So we've got a couple of years of proving out. And then those conversations will actually lead to system-wide uptake. But at the moment, they're just conversations. But we're out there. We're doing them. End goal, every child, every country with access to digital technologies for children would be using a digitally delivered educational product like Digii Social, if not ours, at least something, so that we capture every child in those formative years and protect them with this shield of education. Every child deserves no less than to go into their young adult life protected with knowledge. So terrible things can't and don't happen to them. We already have a school up and running in China. We have one in the UK. We've just started a school in New Zealand and we're pushing out into there. And of course, Australia is our primary market at the moment. And if we had to stay within Australia, every school, regional, remote, rural, all of those schools, because those schools now are really reliant on a motivated and savvy teacher to teach them about cyber education, or the potential of a visiting guest speaker who might come once in a year. We need more than that. Our children deserve more than that. So that's where we're going, every child. For a generation of children, it's almost too late that we've come into the understanding. We now have in the DSM, which is the diagnostic manuals psychologically for, looking at what's happening with children, and there's now a gaming addiction in there. Because that's the world we're living in, where we have such high levels of dopamine with gaming that it's forming a chemical dependency on a game. It's phenomenal. We haven't done enough yet. And I think you can say that. I mean, some of the world's preeminent psychologists neuroscientists are busy programming what's going into people's lives, because they know that if they drop the loot bag at the point in time that a child normally comes out of, say, Minecraft, that the child will stay on for longer. So you keep getting these dopamine hits that you have to stay in the game for. It's very carefully programmed by very, very clever people who are exploiting human beings and our most vulnerable human beings, our children. Children, the mental health and well-being of our Australian children. While suicide is the leading cause of childhood death in Australia by a factor of 4, with at least a quarter of those deaths attributable to something happening in the online life, we're not doing enough. With 25% of Australian children being cyberbullied every year, with 25% of our 12-year-old boys actively watching pornography, average age of access by 8, we're just not doing enough. We're not doing enough to protect our children, and that's the why. Because this is a simple solution to a complex problem. Right. Well, I started way back in the early 90s as a speech pathologist. So way back then you did speech pathology and audiology. So I started working, I worked at PMH, mostly in acute, and in just developmental management of children. And then I moved into community. When I moved into community health, I realised very quickly how little I knew about complex families and complex social presentations. And really that started the ball rolling that there had to be an attitude and a behaviour that supported learning, not just a theory. So I went back and requalified in all sorts of things. I did a bit of natural medicine. I did a master's in NLP, which is a branch of psychology. So I went all the way through that. I'm a professional hypnotherapist in there as well. It's really wrapped around human psychology. So I'm a family therapist and a counsellor. I'm a parent coach. So all of the qualifications and natural medicine that I've done over the years are really about the well-being, the holistic well-being, really about children and families. So that's kind of been a long road, and one that I hope continues. I hope I'll be a lifelong learner and keep adding skills and qualifications to what I do know. I would say that my public face, I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of training. I speak at conferences, I do TV every week, and I do it pretty confidently. And I would say that most people would be very surprised how underconfident I am in myself secretly on the inside, but just keep showing up and hoping that that changes. Start with your maths. I'd encourage everyone to go out there, make sure that there's a gap in the market and that there's a market in your gap, that you do have a saleable product at the end of the day. Do all your maths. How much money can you actually make out of it? Because startup world is, you can guarantee that you're going to be working every hour of every day, literally, for a long time before the money starts getting into the bank. Make sure you're up for that. It feels glorious when you come up with the idea. The glory drops away and you've got to be able to stay the game, especially if you put money into it. So I'd suggest start with a good plan, and if you don't know how to do that, find a good mentor to help you really, really pull your idea apart. It's really interesting talking to people outside of Perth who've never been to Perth, especially, if I'm talking to someone and we're 8 hours ahead, they go, 8 hours ahead and 80 years behind. There's kind of there's this thought that little old isolated Perth got trapped in 1964 and we're still wearing long socks and, listening to the Beatles. Or some of us are. But, I think there's this feeling that we're a non-progressive, very dated city. And it's not true. I don't know. I don't think I'm in the joking phase of my startup. It's not funny. None. I'm Claire Orange, and this is Untitled.